Changing the brakes on your car might be one of your earlier ventures in wrench turning. It's like the spaghetti meal of working on cars. I'm here today to show you how easy it can be and some general guidelines on what to watch out for. And this video is dedicated to my buddy Jay. Hope you're doing alright, pal. This Subaru has 4-wheel disc brakes, so there is a rotor and caliper at each wheel. Some cars and trucks still have drum brakes in the back. I'll do a video later on my F-150 to specifically cover rebuilding drum brakes. First, you'll need to find 2 bolts that hold the caliper to the bracket. Sometimes these will be small bolts that thread into the slide pins, or sometimes the entire slide pin will be removed. In this case, it's the former. With these removed, the caliper should slide off the old pads, although it may take a little force. Next, the 2 pads can be removed from the bracket. They are slid into 2 guides and sometimes can be a little fussy to remove. Now remove the 2 larger bolts that hold the caliper bracket onto the spindle. These can sometimes be a little tough to remove, so it may help to spray these with penetrating oil before taking them loose. The rotor will now pull off. This Subaru has a drum parking brake. However, your car may have the parking brake built into the caliper and not have all this extra hardware. In some cases, if your rotor is stuck, there will be threaded holes to push the rotor off with a bolt. If you do have a drum parking brake, often it won't need to be rebuilt, but mine was pretty old and worn, so I had to take mine apart. Manufacturers use different designs for drum brakes, and parking brakes are even more varied, so I won't go into a lot of detail here. Look up specific instructions for your vehicle and take plenty of pictures for reference. Now, let's take a look at what our rebuild kit comes with. The new shoes don't have the handbrake actuator installed, so it needs to be transferred from the old shoe. Open up the horseshoe clip with a screwdriver and knock it off the pin. Underneath that is a spring washer. The kit will come with a new washer and clip. Just be sure to reinstall it in the same orientation. There are some pads that the shoes ride on. Make sure they're clean and add a very small touch of high temperature grease. Making these videos adds a lot of time to these jobs by fiddling with the camera so much. These spring clips were a bit of a pain to install. If I do it again, I'll make a tool by cutting a washer in half and welding it to a screwdriver so I can hold the spring down while I install the pin. Drum brakes have a lot of finicky hardware and springs, and they're usually not a mechanic's favorite. I know it's frustrating, but try to stay patient and keep a cool head. I bought performance brakes with slots and holes. Slots keep the pads clean and even, while the holes are supposed to dissipate heat. Because the slots are swept at an angle, these rotors must be installed on a specific side of the car. These had a handy sticker to make it easy to keep track. Take a minute now to make sure the braking surfaces are clean of any grease, using brake parts cleaner or acetone. Different brands of kits will come with different parts, so check to see what will have to be reused or replaced. There are two stainless guides clipped into the bracket. The brake pads move back and forth a small amount, and these act as a bearing surface. I like to make sure the cast surface behind them is clean. Now remove the pins. Keep in mind these pins are the most crucial part of how a disc brake works, so put extra effort into making sure they are clean and operate smoothly. Only use a high temperature grease made for brake components. If you don't, you'll be making a face like this at some point later. Yeah, you don't want to look like this. We'll come back to this later. Sometimes the pins will have a rubber sleeve, and will always have a rubber boot to protect the grease. Make sure this is clipped over the ridges on the pin and bracket to keep everything sealed. Give a double check to make sure the pins slide in and out of the bracket smoothly. Install the new pad guides. There are tabs on the side that can be bent down to lock them into place when installed. Place just a touch of grease on the guides, but not too much or you could have grease splash on your rotor later. Reinstall the rotor. Careful not to touch the brake surface with your dirty hands. Now reinstall the bracket, using some anti-seize on the bolts to help the next guy or gal who has to take this apart. Clean off your new pads before installing with brake parts cleaner or acetone. The caliper is closed shut to compensate for the old worn pads, and you'll need to expand these out. On most calipers, a socket and C-clamp can do this, but very important, if you have calipers that have an integrated parking brake, the caliper piston is threaded in. Pressing it with a C-clamp will damage your caliper. I did a horrible job filming my rear caliper, so here's me compressing the front caliper. It's the same process. Doing this will push brake fluid back through the line. So while doing this, make sure you aren't overflowing your brake fluid reservoir. When installing the caliper, make sure the rubber line isn't twisted around. This can cause your brakes to jam or stick. drum parking brakes need to be manually adjusted. There is an access hole in the drum to turn a star wheel with a screwdriver. Here's an open view of what that looks like. Tighten the adjuster until the shoes just start to grab the rotor, then back off one tooth. The rotor should spin without rubbing the shoes. You won't need to change all 4 brakes at once, but you should at least do them in pairs together, back or front. Give the parking brake a quick check to make sure it engages and releases. The process is the same for the front brakes, just without the hassle of the parking brake. Here's a mistake you might come across. These rotors were completely hashed, but the pads looked almost new. I think the previous owner tried to save money by changing the pads but not replacing or at least having the rotor turned. Do me a favor, don't do this. Remember when I said the slide pins are the most crucial? Well, one of these was really stuck. I soaked it with penetrating oil and let it sit while I worked on the other side for a bit. It looks like someone hit the head of this pin with a hammer for some reason. This was cutting into the rubber boot a little, so I smoothed it out with a grinder. You can install the pads before putting the bracket on the car, but I'm not sure why I changed tactics on the front. Calipers can have 1, 2, even up to 6 pistons. Just make sure you get them all pushed in. Okay, back to this stuck pin. It took a lot of wiggling and pulling to finally get it out. And the culprit? Well, it looks like the previous owner used axle grease, which basically cooked into glue from the heat of the brakes. Okay, and now the final step that you don't want to skip. Breaking in the brakes. I've heard different reasons on how this works. This from PowerStop says it embeds friction material into the cast iron of the rotor. Another is that it simply burns away any residue from the surface of the rotor and the pads. And the one that makes the most sense to me is that you are actually tempering the cast iron by heating it up and cooling it quickly. Whichever the case, this makes a huge difference on how your brakes perform, so don't skip this. You are going to smell your brakes getting very hot during this process, so don't be alarmed by that. And hey, congratulations and give yourself a pat on the back. You've made a big step on maintaining the car for yourself. I hope this could help, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.